Our generation, Gen Z, has one big down and one big upside. The downside is that we are kind of guinea pigs of the 21st century, the first natives of a paradigm shift towards digitalism. And in consequence to that over-information through accessibility, we have become aimless and overwhelmed about everything. The upside is that we are extraordinarily adaptable, open-minded, and creative. We are pioneers of a new era of communication, generation one of a new world. We are growing up at this moment, and a direction in life is now needed, but that aimlessness that hovers above us often currently wins. But that's not with us. We get in tune with our fear, emotions, stress, and we know that life falls apart. That just happens, but that this is not something that we must surrender to or are victimized by. We now have the tools at hand to do something about it and start redirecting our lives. Let's go! Life is entropy. It's always just about to fall apart. Somebody in your family dies. You get fired from your job. You're young and aimless and don't know what your next move should be. You're addicted to validation or to social media or to alcohol. Whatever the situation is, when life falls apart, we better be ready. It's 2016. I'm watching a movie with my dad. And as I'm watching that movie, this sensation comes up. It's those little bursts of dissociation where I am experiencing myself out of my body, distant from what usually should be familiar or known, my body, other people, a home. In short chunks, all those things feel odd and distant and absurd. It's a full focus on that high energy car scene. And then split second later, I realize I'm actually sitting in a dark room. Everything feels distorted. And I thought to myself that my life won't be the same anymore. And it wasn't. This is my life falling apart. It was the start of a 6-month journey of daily dissociation episodes, where from time to time, I wasn't sure if and how I could keep going. Our lives are constantly just about to fall apart. It can be a solid decision for you to sort yourself out for your moment of when things break loose. The thing is though, things always break loose and you cannot really be prepared because falling apart obviously does not look the same for anyone. Some are 65 when it happens, when their husband dies. Some are 10 when their parents divorce. I was 17. For some people, this moment is a sudden event, and for some it's been building up gradually. Now looking back at it, my situation was a form of self-fulfilling prophecy. I had these little glimpses of dissociation for my entire life, and in hindsight I could have seen it coming. But we often don't see danger until it's here. So after that incident on the movie night, it wiped me out so hard that I had to rebuild my entire system for 4 years. My point here is that everyone is confronted with the necessity to sort oneself out. And in general, in the way how we grew up in society, in our surroundings, we usually are not made to be ready or prepared for a situation like that. So what I'm about to share here is collected information from the last 8 years where I intensely exposed myself to what exactly you can do when your life falls apart. What can you do in your situation? We just need to seriously learn how to deal with it, handle it when it happens, and make sure that the suffering does not sustain. See, I could have probably split up this video into 20 different topics, made 20 different videos with it, sugarcoat them with all different stories. But I feel like, especially with topics like that, I don't want to be shallow and I don't want to bullshit you in any kind of way. I only want to provide you with high quality information and actionable steps, and that's it. Why resilience? By definition, resilience means 1, the capacity to withstand or recover quickly from difficulties. Or 2, the ability of a substance or object to spring back into shape, elasticity. And yeah, when life falls apart, this is exactly what we need. We'll go through that step by step, but first I want you to think of your life situation for a moment. How is your life falling apart right now? Or how could it? What are darker aspects of you? Things that you don't feel very comfortable with, fear that reoccurs in your life. What are you suffering from? And what holds the potential within you to break loose? Whatever comes out from that now, document it in some way. Write it down or record an audio message to yourself. And then we go from there and we split up this video into 3 major parts. The first one is stress. We gotta learn how stress works. This is one of the most primitive parts of our biology, and we gotta know what's going on there and how we behave and act when stress is there. 2, coping. This is what we do when we are already influenced by stress and we build our life around that trauma. Build strategies to cope and handle the new life situation. And then the 3rd part is resolving. We're gonna explore different approaches of what we can do to work through trauma, stress, and stuck emotions. That will bring your life back together and you will not need to carry any more weight with you from the past. I want you to imagine that everything you experience, good or bad, extraordinary or trivial, goes through a prism. It splits every moment into 3 different perception layers. 1, the situation, the external situation that is happening objectively. Are we walking on a mountain? Are we going through a city? 2, sensation. Which senses are we using to experience the situation? Do we see it? Do we hear it? Do we smell it? Taste or touch it? And 3, emotion. How do we feel as the situation happens? All of that information gets stored in the brain. The situation we experience externally has the biggest influence to our chemistry, to our hormones internally. And how that chemistry looks like obviously really depends on what is happening outside in the experience. Is it safe or is it dangerous? A neutral or positive situation creates a particular set of hormones, and a dangerous, negative situation creates a particular hormone mix. And when that happens, the external situation triggers a stress response inside the body. It tries to handle what's going on, and it does that in 3 different ways. It's fighting, it's fleeing, or it's playing dead. This whole process is one of the most primal instincts, and it still applies to our daily lives today. And most of the stress we experience on a daily life is just resolved spontaneously again. The body just removes the stress, and it does that over 2 different lanes. The rational lane is just finding a logical conclusion to a stressor. So, good example for that is when we are kids, we put our hands on the stove and it's hot, and that obviously fires a stress response. We react, we cry, we freak out because we burnt ourselves. But then we soon, right after, learn why it happened. We put our hands on the stove and it's really hot, and we should not do that. So we classify the stress and we are able to rationally, spontaneously resolve it. And then there's the physical spontaneous response where we activate the body in a form to be able to escape from the stressful situation. There's this book I have called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. It's about stress and stress responses and coping and diseases. And basically the punchline of it is that when zebras are being chased by, say, a lion, and they're in that situation, it's obviously a stress for the zebra because they're about to die. So what they do, they obviously run away. If they're fortunate and are able to escape, what they do, they shelter themselves, they lay down somewhere where it's safe, and they shake their entire body, and that whole process of intensely activating the body resolves the stress that is being stuck. The chemistry is still there, they just survived, they didn't die, and now they shake, and over this process they are able to resolve the stress response in the body. This happens throughout the day many times. We see something or experience something that we kind of classify in the body as negative or dangerous or not safe. And then through those 2 lanes, we're often just able to resolve it. And this happens on a subconscious level. What happens exactly when your body is in overflow, when things are just too much to be resolved spontaneously? Where neither the top-down rational approach or the bottom-up physiological approach work. If we remember that prism of situation, sensation, emotion, the emotion cannot be resolved because the situation in theory is still there. We weren't able to find closure with it, so the body is still working on overload with that, trying to solve it. And then what happens when this emotion is stuck is that we develop new behavior. Maybe you can relate to this when you feel like your life feels different now, or somebody tells you that you have changed, or you perceive other people in a different way than you did before. All of those are the voices of the sustaining stress response that imprints itself in your body and in your mind. When you ask yourself, over the years, and we all naturally change, life is developing, we have new experiences, we meet new people, we let go of other people. This is all a normal process of life. But if you really listen to yourself now and reflect on how your inner self and your outer behavior has changed over the last years, what changed exactly? How are you different now in comparison to the past? Did you have to go through any specific situations that had an impact on you, that were beyond exciting or beyond painful? Body awareness, so really feeling yourself and knowing where emotion sits in your body, is so beneficial to resolving your issue and get yourself unstuck. So you can do this with me right now. Just close your eyes, sit down or lay down. Try to be observant of your body. Do a body scan. How does your head feel like? How does your upper body feel like? And your legs? How do they relate to one another? Just as you are at this moment, just observe yourself. Do that for a little while. And then I want you to kind of explore your memories from the past. And I want you to set on one particular stressful or traumatic experience you've had in the past. Visualize the situation, how it was with all your senses, and notice how that may cause a shift of awareness in your body. How does it feel different now? This practice, body awareness in general, is going to be a major factor for the upcoming 2 chapters. What I'm trying here is to really help you develop a relationship with yourself and how it actually is, without putting any masks on top of the problems or on top of the issues and just trying to kind of help you with dealing with it temporarily. I really want you to find a way for you that brings you as close to the issues as possible and give you the tools that you need to resolve them. So yeah, with that being said, let's head into the next chapter. So when you're stressed, cannot be resolved spontaneously. You cannot rationally box it in something top down, and it doesn't help when you sit down in a pit and just shake your whole body for 20 minutes. When neither of those things work, you do one thing and one thing only. You adjust your whole life around that one trauma that is sitting inside you. You were bullied in school and 10 years have passed, and now when a situation comes up and something about the situation reminds you of the situation where you were bullied, for example, the color of someone's hair or the color of a t-shirt, or you hear something that reminds you of, whoa, there's a bee. Whoa. I'm getting re-traumatized right here. Actually, this is maybe a good example. If you're reminded of a situation from the past by some form in the present, the same emotional reaction comes up and you behave differently. You're literally affected by that stuck trauma in your life and you adjust your life around it. You maybe avoid talking to those people, or you avoid talking to people in general. You feel more secluded. In our whole entire life, we built strategies around this stress we weren't able to let go. Basically, it's unbearable to handle stress 24/7. So your body and you subconsciously, you develop a system that enables you to cope with the stressor in a way that is not as acute. You begin to drink alcohol, so the pain fades away. You eat junk food and hide yourself in the bedroom because it feels good to numb yourself with sugar. You avoid people in general. You lock yourself away so you don't have to be confronted with what is actually happening. You don't have to talk about it. You give up on all your dreams just so you don't have to feel the sense of responsibility anymore. But also seemingly good things can be strategies. You start to excessively work out to distract yourself. You wake up at 5 a.m. every single day just so you can kind of feel better about yourself, kind of hide yourself behind the perfect morning routine. All those situations are coping mechanisms when they create a sort of barrier between you and the stress. We literally don't know how to handle or kind of cope with the situation in any better way. So we build those coping mechanisms. Because with those strategies, your stress literally fades away and you kind of bypass the trauma. You just don't let it get too close to you. But it's important to mention that this doesn't mean that the stress is actually gone. It only means you're coping with it. You're temporarily avoiding it. A random situation might be around the corner, and when it comes up and when it's there and you're confronted with it, it will reawaken the trauma. The situation comes up and you will be confronted with it and you get the same emotional reaction to it, if we like it or not. Coping is really important, but it's not the final way. It's also a natural part of kind of the process of resolving. When I was sharing my situation in 2016 earlier, it took me like 2 years until I really got to the place where I'm ready to confront it in its depth and actually looked deeper inside myself to actually resolve it. I was in many coping mechanisms in 2016 when the intensity of my dissociation decreased, and then in 2017 I was happy to finally be able to distract myself and actually feel something that is not stressful from time to time. Meeting Maria, my girlfriend, spending so much time with her, us going on a long travel together where we explored the world, all of that in theory was just me kind of getting to a safe spot temporarily so I could kind of chill for a little bit. None of that resolved my trauma that I kind of been building up in 2016. The stress was still right there, and I was still very unstable towards derealization and depersonalization. I was really afraid of it, that it might appear, but I was just kind of ignoring it. I was trying to live my life, and then after 2017, a switch happened, and I was like, okay, now I'm ready to actually confront this. And I was able to do that from a much better place, and I don't think I would have been able to do it in the same effective way if I hadn't coped with it for some time. It's important to know that strategies and coping mechanisms are based on fear, because without the fear we wouldn't need to build strategies or to cope. We would just be free and receptive, being able to respond to situation instead of reacting to them with a strategy. By going through life and experiencing stress and building up your reservoir of strategies, your life literally narrows down in options, because you always kind of need to dance around and kind of walk around the stuck trauma that is inside you, build coping mechanisms and strategies all around them, and your options of what you can do without being stressed or without the strategies, they decrease over time. It's a vicious cycle because life transforms to worse and worse over time. And we're sort of stuck in this evil hell aspect of life. Okay, actionable step. Think of some situations where you have been building up a coping mechanism, where you've been in a strategy, where you've kind of been confronted with a stress and you wanted to avoid it, so you build kind of a way around it. Write those situations down. Just write a list. Coping mechanisms, strategies that are based on a fear and stress response. This is where it should all lead up to. We don't want to deal with coping anymore. We don't want to be stuck in this endless loop of different strategies. We want to be able to detect what's going on inside of us and have the tools at hand to resolve it. This seems like the most straightforward way, the way how we should go about this, but we don't really learn too much about how we can interact with our sustained stress response and everything that comes along with it. It's really easy to become overwhelmed with different programs kind of firing each other up, and then it's just a big mess and we're not able to see through it and actually find a way out. Often the end result is just a surrendering to that shitty situation because we have no idea how we can move forward in a constructive and natural way. So I'm gonna split up this resolving chapter into 5 different chunks that kind of put a light on different aspects of this resolving process. And by doing that, my intention is for you to be able to navigate yourself out of that dense situation. One keyword is gonna play a big role in this whole chapter, and it's exposure. Let's get exposed to our triggers. Being able to see and observe the stress response and trauma you hold within yourself, and then have the tools at hand to resolve it. By doing that, it's kind of split up into 2 sections where first off, we gotta have some practices and approaches at hand that actually bring up that stress, that trauma up to the surface for us to see it and observe it. And then second stage kind of comes in where we are able to resolve it when it's there, when we see it clearly. Hormesis is kind of a phenomenon where a sort of harmful substance can be beneficial to a living organism when the quantity of the harmful substance is small. So kind of intentionally putting ourselves into a stress response that actually is beneficial because it allows deeper laying stress responses to unlock themselves and detach themselves from the body and then get flushed out our system with the stress response that we exposed ourselves intentionally. Breathing is interesting because it is one of the few things in the body that are part of the autonomic nervous system, so processes that happen automatically without us thinking about it. So the breathing, digestion, heart rate. But the breath can also be changed intentionally. We can always decide how we want to breathe. We can go faster, we can go slower, we can change the rhythm, stuff like that. With the process, we regulate the body from the bottom up. We activate the deepest part with the breath, and then it ripples through all layers from the bottom upwards. There is a really good TED Talk about exactly this topic. I think it's called How to Be Brilliant Every Single Day by Alan Watkins. Basically, he talks about the different layers that exist. So deepest physiology, and that has an influence to the emotions. And the emotions have an influence to the feeling. And feeling has an influence to the thinking. Thinking goes then from the internal realm to the external. Thinking and feeling influence the behavior, and behavior in the end kind of influences our life performance or just our life experience really. And with the breathing, we kind of skip all the parts that we often get stuck in, the thinking and our emotions and our feeling. We activate the most primitive part of our body, the physiology, with the breathing. And that activation, that hormesis that happens down there, then ripples through all the layers up to the top and can regulate emotion, feelings, thinking, and so on. Okay, treat this and the next one as an actionable step. You can do this with me, try it out. Every morning I sit down on my sofa or I go out, I put in some cinematic ambient music and I breathe for 5 to 15 minutes. Sometimes it's a bit shorter, sometimes it's a bit longer. I'm not really that strict about it. I just really enjoy entering this space of, okay, full-on introspection before the day really starts. I've been doing a focused work session before that, but other than that, the day is still fresh. It's maybe like 8:30 or 9 a.m. and I kind of want to prime myself for the day. I sit down, I close my eyes, and I breathe fully in through the nose or through the mouth, and then I just let go. I inhale with more force and then I exhale, which is like letting go. I do that like maybe around 20 to 30 times until I inhale and I exhale, and then after the exhale I hold my breath. I just sit still, observe my body, listen to the music, enjoy the sun, and I just kind of hold my breath alongside it until it comes to the point where the first urge comes up that I need air. And then I inhale fully again, and then on the inhale I hold my breath for maybe like 10 to 15 seconds and then I'll let go. This is one round, and usually I do like 2 to 5 rounds. This obviously has an influence to the body and your body reacts to it. You feel that physically and mentally, in your mind and emotionally, just how you feel overall. I guess it really depends on the day, but usually it really makes me feel grounded, connected to the deepest part of myself. Often I feel extremely clear and sharp and in control of my own life. This is really why over time, and I was experimenting with that, I was doing it more and then I didn't do it for some time, but over time in general it has developed into a non-negotiable thing for me to do during a day. An emotional check-in that is that honest and true and authentic to yourself with such little time commitment is really incomparable to anything else. Things that kind of rub around negatively in my subconscious will reveal themselves through the exercise, and then I have a chance to bring it to the surface. This particular breathing exercise is basically the Wim Hof method. So kind of like the breathing section of the Wim Hof method. I'm gonna leave a link in the description of a guided breathing session that you can take, just like a follow along. So what I just talked about is kind of like the daily low effort practice. And this now is kind of like the more energy consuming, more intentional practice that I like to do like every 3 to 6 weeks. Each one of them has their own qualities, their own place, and I've found that the mixture of having kind of the two in my life, kind of like the daily as a daily check-in, as a priming for my day, and then the monthly as a more in-depth review of a particular section or season or month in my life, to be extremely beneficial. So as I said, every month or every like 3 to 6 weeks, I really like to block out half a day, at least 3 hours, I think, and I shut off everything in how people could reach me, my phone, and I lock myself in, and I lay down on my sofa or on the ground and I breathe for around an hour. And every now and then I also like to book a session, somebody else that guides me through an extended breathing session for that hour. And I can recommend you to do the same as well. It's really amazing to have someone guide you through and give you an experience, especially if you're starting out. Okay, so I come into this half day with an intention, with a clear aim in my mind beforehand. At what stage in my life am I at right now? What am I suffering from? What do I want to explore within myself? I then, as I'm laying down, do a check-in with myself. How do I truly feel at this moment? Which parts of me, physically and emotionally, feel tense and feel like they need attention? This is kind of my route planning, my Google Maps for the experience that is about to come, because it doesn't matter then. Once I set my intention, it was like, okay, I want to explore this issue that I'm having, or why do I feel so sad all the time, or why do I worry about things all the time, or why do I suddenly perceive my surroundings in such a different way suddenly? Where did the derealization come from, or why did I suddenly start to drink alcohol to numb myself or whatever? These are all kind of like intentions, explorations to ask yourself, and that's the Google Maps beforehand. You set the route, you set your destination, and then when you're in the experience, it doesn't really matter if you take the highway or the scenic route. If you go to that destination, you have like a clear path to go to. And then during the experience, this is always kind of like your anchor point on what you put back your focus again when you like undergo different things. So I get clear with my intention for this session, I sit still with it, and then I start the breathing. Kind of go from preparation to activation. Similar to the daily thing, I go fully in, full inhale into the stomach, into the chest, full in, and then let go. I keep going with that. The goal is to keep it rhythmical. The pace really doesn't matter that much. If I feel like it's too intense or it's too exhausting or it's moving too fast, I just slow down the rhythm and I go slower. So like that, it doesn't have to be very fast. You can steer this a little bit. If you feel like you want to get more, you speed up the rhythm. And if you feel like it's too much, you lower the rhythm. The goal kind of is to keep it rhythmical eventually and find your pace. And when there's any sort of disruption, you can always put your focus back on the breathing. That is the only thing that really stays the same throughout this experience. The thing is, having your focus only on the breathing will not be possible for some times during that experience, because through that continuous breathing you kind of expose your body to a controlled stress response, the hormesis. So your mind will try to fight it off just so you stop. This is kind of the same part of the brain that also does not want to stand up in the morning or go for a run or go work out or do the uncomfortable thing. This is your part of the brain speaking that wants to keep you safe and safe only. So a different variety of resistances can come up in experiences like this, and it's important to be aware of them in advance. So once they appear during your breathing experience there, you know how to classify them and you know how to interact with it. Those resistances can be physical, mental, and emotional. Physical is kind of just like your whole body can feel a bit tingly, or you may feel a little bit dizzy, or kind of the sensation between maybe your limbs and your core body feels distant or different. Your hands can sometimes kind of crouch down like this, so you get kind of like these T-Rex arms. This is like a thing called tetany. Mental resistance, a sudden increase of thinking, where you kind of like just, your thoughts just pop up and you think about what you're doing and you question if this is healthy or unhealthy or if you actually like this. Just like a sudden start of rumination and mental resistance, trying you to stop, rationally kind of classify what you're doing and then kind of finding a conclusion that pulls you away from it. And then there is emotional resistance, just emotions that can come up in an experience like that. Anger, sadness, joy, laughter, aggression. And often it feels uncomfortable to sit with that emotion. A reaction from that often is to just stop and not having to handle the appearing emotion anymore. It's really good to know about the different resistances, physical, mental, emotional, and how they kind of approximately could look like, just so you're able to navigate them when you're in the experience. There's only one goal when any sort of resistance happens. You focus back on your breathing. You naturally will fade away. You will think about things, you will focus your attention towards different things than the breathing. That is completely normal. But once the resistance comes up, you feel like it's confronting you, you gotta focus back to your breath. And you're gonna notice you can change the rhythm. You can go slower if you feel like this is too intense. You can just lower the rhythm, but keep breathing and keep observing your body undergoing this process. What usually happens after like 20 seconds or 1 minute is that the resistance will fade out. It will transform into something else. And the urgency is not there anymore. And it just suddenly doesn't feel like a resistance anymore. When the emotion comes up, you just focus back in your breath and just sit with the emotion. Instead of pushing it away, just let that sadness exist or let the anger exist. And if that means for you to scream or cry or laugh or kind of hit the pillow or whatever, then all of that are kind of things from your subconscious that need to get out. And if you're able to let it out, that is exactly the process of resolving that we're talking about. So the goal is to stay neutral, focus on the breathing, and observe your surroundings and observe your resistances as they happen from an outsider perspective. And then after a while of non-stop breathing and kind of going through the different acts of resistance, I could have either picked a timestamp or in my Spotify playlist, a particular song comes up, and I know that the activational part of this whole breathing exercise comes to an end. This could be like 45 minutes in. I can also link down in the description a Spotify playlist that I use for those longer breathing exercises. I know that this is the final song of the activation, and then for that kind of last minute or last half minute, for the last few seconds, I want to give my everything. I really experiment with it. Sometimes I go nuts and I just like really increase my breathing rhythm. I go like faster in and faster out, faster in, faster out, just like kind of the final push. And by that time, sometimes it can feel really intense already. So you just kind of dependent on the mood. But this is kind of like your last stage of activation. And then the final breath comes, go fully in, and on the inhale, I stop. I hold my breath. I kind of come to stillness by the time you've been breathing rhythmically, continuously for like 40 minutes or 50 minutes, then suddenly you stop. I usually just lay there and I observe how my body feels like, how that sudden contrast feels like from lots of movement to stillness. And this is exactly where we move from activation to integration. I think I've had the most profound and most spiritual experiences in my life during these integration parts. Sometimes an extreme connection to my body, to myself, to my purpose appeared. I felt like everything plays in perfect harmony. It puts everything in perspective. If you're able to have been working through the resistance, it is able to come up, and then through that hold and through that sudden stillness, you see it clearly. This overwhelming and ecstatic and often very positive experience helps to actually resolve it. What has come to the surface now has the opportunity to be let go. And it's hard to put that into words, but this is exactly how it feels. This offers such a unique, but such a relevant perspective into your inner self and into the place that you have in this life. and it puts all your problems and prolonged stress responses and trauma in perspective, and it actually helps to kind of integrate it into the grand scheme of things. Okay, so all that happens as I'm holding the breath. And I do that as long as it feels comfortable. I don't want to push anything ever at all. This is where this kind of stuff can actually get dangerous, where you're like, okay, I'm gonna hold my breath for 5 minutes, or something like that. This is not what you want to do. You hold your breath as long as it feels comfortable, and as soon as you're like, okay, this is getting enough, you just like exhale and return your breathing back to normal. So all that activation is done again, and you just like return to normal breathing. You let the autonomic nervous system kind of take the lead again with the breath. I then take time to kind of process, I get out of this experience, and I just take my time to maybe journal or just write some things down, or just like sit in that energy for longer and like kind of reflect on what the fuck just happened. I'm gonna open up a space here on YouTube or maybe Patreon or somewhere very soon, where I want to do guided prolonged breathing sessions, maybe a couple times a month. So definitely have a look at the description. I want this to be a very natural experience for everybody. I think I made it clear so many times, but I don't want to do any of this to force anything upon anybody. And the solution is different for everyone. These are just kind of like frameworks that we can put ourselves in and then undergo a process that inevitably will feel different to everyone, but the direction is the right one. So definitely check it out, and if you resonate with it, please join in. In a couple months, it's going to be winter here in Austria. Every morning when it's really cold outside, I will walk up to here, to this roof, go to where my rain barrel stands, and I will break it open with an axe from the ice. I pull off my robe, I climb into the barrel, and shocked by the cold water, I sit down, I breathe, I try to relax. The water is just above the freezing point, and it's extremely uncomfortable. In the water, I can barely think, so I try to keep calm, I focus on my breathing, and I begin to observe. Just observe what is happening to me at that moment. And after 1 minute, or 2 minutes, or maybe 5 minutes, I exit the water. You can see a line on my chest where my head looks normal, but everything below that line would be extremely red from the blood circulation. I'm standing outside and it's freezing cold temperatures. I do some horse dances or just try to move my body in some way to gradually warm myself up again, and I feel alive. And in that moment, I remember why I even got out here in the first place, why I went from my warm, cozy bed into harsh, cold weather. My hormone levels, my endorphins, my dopamine, my adrenaline is all peaking way up. This process is also a form of exposure, hormesis, intentional stress. What this does, and what it also literally feels like, is that it flushes out my body. It cleanses my body with the stress hormones. This process is so intense and so life-threatening to the body. You turn on like your most primitive survival instinct when you go into cold water, because in reality, in the non-control setting, that would basically mean you will be dead in 10 minutes. So your body activates all sort of things, and you regulate your stress from the bottom up. And with that process, you can also flush out all other stress or trauma that is stuck in your body. Through that momentum, it is able to get out as well. When you regularly do the practice, it will not only bring out all your junk from inside your body, but it also has effects on different areas of well-being. It affects your alertness and focus. Through the increase of serotonin receptor sensitivity, it affects general well-being and mood regulation. It's natural painkillers because of the endorphins. You just feel great after a cold exposure because the dopamine is kicking in and you get a high from that. And stress adaptation. You are going to react differently to stress because you kind of went through the ultimate stress response. There's like nothing more stressful for the body than like being in cold water and kind of freezing to death. It relativizes the whole spectrum. But okay, what can you do? What are the actionable steps for you to start with cold exposure? First off, if you don't have the same capacities than I do here, with cold winters and a rain barrel at hand, cold showers will also do the trick. 100%. I recommend you to check out the resources are linked in the description. It's again, lots of Wim Hof. That dude just brings so much value into our lives, it's insane. Okay, here are some applications that you can follow. Start with 30 seconds to 1 minute in the cold shower and increase over time. Experiment with it. If you're starting out and if you go into actual water, just kind of expose yourself first. Be in there for 5 seconds, observe your stress response, observe the shock, and kind of try to not react to it, but kind of stay in it. And as soon as you kind of feel like the shock fades away, because that usually happens after, I don't know, like 10, 15 seconds, it really depends. But the initial situation of you urgently want to exit again fades away eventually. So maybe just try to lean into that observer state, expose yourself, stay in that. And as soon as you're like, okay, this was enough exposure, you get out. 10, 15 seconds. If you want to increase the time in the water, just really, again, focus on your breath. Observe the shock response and focus on your breath. Observe the shock response fading away, focus on your breath. Observe you kind of sitting with the discomfort and focus on your breath. So try it out. It's going to be 30 seconds the next time and 2 minutes if you've been doing it for 1 month. Just play around with it, but it's really important to remember to never force anything. The goal is not to stay in there the longest, because that actually can get really dangerous. Don't let your ego be in the way. Just see it as a form of inner exploration. It's more important to figure out a way that works for you to be able to do it regularly. Be able to do it every single morning or every single day or every week. Just give yourself a chance to sustainably benefit from that practice on a regular basis. If you remember the TED Talk that I've been talking about before, the how to be brilliant every single day thing with the different layers, there's like a clear distinction to be made between emotion and feeling. The feeling is my subjective interpretation of a situation. I'm on a bike, I cycle downhill through a forest. The adrenaline and the whole situation creates a feeling within me that feels euphoric, uplifting, and exciting. Now that is my subjective feeling. There could be another person who is exposed to the same exact situation and it feels overwhelming, uncomfortable, and nauseating. These are the two different subjective feelings attached to the same emotion. The emotion is just kind of like the first initial reaction to the physiology. We are on a bike and that is like kind of our physiology working, our body just working, and all of this data is coming to your brain through electric signals, electromagnetic signals, chemical waves, pressure waves, all of that, and that is the emotion. It's energy in motion. The emotion is objective. It requires the same emotion for both people that go down the bike park, but the interpretation of this emotion happening in the body is subjective, and that creates the feeling. And now with this practice, we're able to detach the feeling from the emotion so that the situation that you are in doesn't trigger anymore. The goal is to enter a situation and stay in control, where we can respond from our own energy instead of react from this traumatic point of view. Okay, action step for you. Write down 3 to 5 things that trigger you, where a situation causes a negative emotional reaction in your body. Try to stay concrete here. So maybe like a particular situation you have experienced, a memory that when you think about it still causes an emotional reaction. We can get to more advanced stages where like a particular feeling where you're like, why do I always feel overwhelmed? Or why do I always feel anxious when I'm with people? These are like overarching problems. We now kind of want to lean into particular situations and kind of look at one program at a time, because in reality, a problem is only created over a multitude of different programs firing together. When we're focusing on one program at a time and work through each one individually, in theory, the big problem will dissolve itself over time when we work through them. So write down 3 to 5 different things, situations that trigger you. Write it out right now. You can pause the video and just like keep watching afterwards. This is important now for the next step. So do that right now. Okay, when you have them written out, select one of those triggers for now. Just take one that you resonate with right now. Sit down, close your eyes, and start to visualize the situation. What exactly happened? Where are you? Who are you with? Which situation causes the emotional shift? and just really visualize it. Soak it in with all your different senses. What do you see? What do you hear? Like, how are you standing or sitting or walking? And observe. Observe the body, how it shifts, its emotional state and the feeling attached to it. How does your body now feel different to just a moment ago? And what exactly feels different? Sit with that for a moment. Maybe it's a tight chest, or your limbs feel a little bit disconnected from the rest of your body, or your head feels proportionally bigger than usual. Just kind of try to become aware of the different dissonances that now fire up in your body as you've revisualized the situation. This collection of dissonances make up the program, and by doing this practice we want to take a close look at each individual dissonance after another, and by doing that we're able to kind of let go of it through the whole process. Okay, pick one dissonance, maybe the one that feels the strongest at the moment. Just pick it and put your focus right on it. And then either follow my words or say it out loud to yourself. Release root cause now. This prompt from the neocortex, release root cause now, is able to disconnect the physiological reaction, so the dissonance, from the emotion. Repeat this with the next dissonance. Just like switch your focus again to the next strongest dissonance, focus on it, full attention on it, just observe. Release root cause now. You can keep the focus on it after those words and see how the dissonance is transforming. It's kind of shifting. It may lose its kind of like magnitude or significance. It may fade away completely, but just like try to lean into this observer state and really see how those dissonances kind of move through your body. You can pause this video now and do the same exact thing with all the other dissonances that are part of this program right now. Just switch your focus on the next dissonance, full focus on it, think it to yourself or say it out loud, release root cause now, just kind of go through them after another. Always kind of pick the one that it feels the strongest and feels the most important at a particular time. So you can pause the video now and just keep watching after you've done that. When no dissonances are left, you can again follow my words or say it out loud yourself. Find positive sensation. This prompts the neocortex to fill up the gaps that you've just created by releasing the root cause with your own emotion. Basically, you're saying to yourself, keep building a responsive emotion instead of a reactive one. Basically, as you go through this process, always be aware of any more potential dissonances to pop up. If this happens, if you feel like a negative emotion again, go back to step 1, release root cause now, and then repeat step 2, find positive sensation. If you arrive at a place where no more dissonances pop up and you feel neutral or positive after you said find positive sensation, basically the program has been cleared and there's like one third step. Follow my words or say it out yourself. Save. The neocortex kind of tells the limbic system that this process is done now and that you can store the emotions just as they are in this manner. And there you go, that's the whole process. Now you can go about and maybe like revisualize the trigger that you've just been writing down before and see how the situation now feels different in your body. You react to it differently on an emotional level, and that will have an effect to your just subconscious emotional reaction when you go about your life. You can do that process with every situation you've been writing down before, or just any situation that triggers something inside you. This process is literally you rewiring your brain from the trauma that you've been building up. So I can totally recommend you to learn that in depth. Maybe go through this section a couple times because it's like a lot of information. I'm also going to link to some resources in the description that you can check out if you want to learn more. Just wanted to reiterate that all the practices that I've been sharing here in this video is either something that I have been learning from professionals like the breath work or the limbic system therapy, or that I've been spending hundreds of hours doing or learning about, like the cold exposure. Once I started interacting with those areas of myself, interact with stress and trauma and triggers over those practices, my whole life changed for the better. I just wanted to share those 3 different practices because they have definitely stood out in comparison to all the other things that I've been kind of learning over the years. the amount of information here that I've been kind of sharing is like all the info that I collected throughout the last 8 years. So it's a lot, and I've been kind of going through seasons where I really leaned into one particular one at a time. And even to this day, to be completely honest, I don't do all these practices or have my whole life kind of tuned out for exactly that. This is just kind of like my personal resilience North Star of how I want to aim to be, instead of just being that all the time. That is, I feel like, really unrealistic, because life just changes and shifts its energy from time to time. I think it's important to mention that, because I was kind of thinking about this just now, that if you're watching this and you've been in like over 1 hour in the video already, you're like, oh my God, how can I apply all of this? Like now, this is like so much. So don't be overwhelmed. You can always come back to this video like in half a year or in a year and just like pick one thing that you resonate with the most and just kind of give yourself the chance to actually learn from it, instead of just like treating this as another YouTube video. I just want to give you the best chances to be able to absorb it in the most constructive way for you. So yeah, belief now is the last point that I want to talk about here. I feel like it's important. It doesn't talk about any particular practice. It's just like an overall philosophy of how I treated my life, especially during the times when I was falling apart. Before we dive into this, I was kind of on the fence if I should add another chapter to this video called communication, where you can really benefit in getting your life back together when you know how to interact with your surroundings, when you know about personality types and different approaches different people have about life. Because it can feel very overwhelming when you, with your personality, go about your life and everything feels distant and different. And especially when you're in a stress response, you don't have the capacity where you can be empathetic or intuitive with your surroundings. So I was almost gonna like talk about more about communication, but I think I will leave this at that for now, that I can recommend you to do a personality test for you to understand yourself. And also, as you're doing this, you can observe what other personalities are out there. This is not to create more black and white thinking, but more to know and actually see how different people can be and how they are. We all experience life in a different way. By knowing what is out there and how we could perceive life differently, you gain a new perspective on the significance of your own life. Biggest takeaway for me from learning personality is I know how I am and I know how others are, and most importantly, I know how I can most constructively interact with others. There are a couple of things that I want to share about belief, because chances are when your life is falling apart, parts of your belief system or maybe the whole thing collapses. The North Star of your life, your main direction, dissolved because life just turned out to be pure chaos. So something new is needed in this situation, a new direction. I obviously can't tell what that is for you, but you will need to do your best to find it, because it is the underlying force of why we do things, what we stand for, our values. Here are some things and some examples that I've learned in the last 8 years of my life, where it really was a very intense time of gaining and losing direction in life. Some of them still resonate with me and some definitely don't, but all of them helped me to navigate a particular part of my life at some point. And again, this is not to be taken literally. You should not believe in the same things that I do, but these are just like practical examples of what you can believe in. And then from that, if you're lacking like a base, like a bone structure of that right now, you can figure out your own belief over time. I believe in God. I think I might have always done that, but now that I was able to shed my layers, I can truly feel it. I'm really, really small. Compared to the scale of the universe, I don't matter at all. I'm aware of my own existence. Doesn't this make me really special? I'm energy squeezed into a human body that can do something with that energy. Nature is everything. I am achieving what I want. I needed to know what I pursue And then I needed a discipline and willpower to pursue it. I can do anything. It's time to get my ass back together. I need to be strong now. I want to be a man. I found what I wanted by lowering the friction between my authentic me and my surroundings. I worked through my trauma, and then I was able to see the world clearly again. I really hope you can take something from all of this. In a way, I created this for myself 8 years ago because I know I would have benefited from all that information, all these practices so much.